Do you ever wonder what it takes for someone to turn their struggle into change and what the special combination is for any particular person to do that within a certain industry? My guest today took her breastfeeding and pumping struggle and has turned it into a desire to make pumping comfier and easier for so many other people. And I am so excited to share her story. Alex was such a delight to talk to. She's from Australia. So we were talking from very different time zones, but she really took her struggle breastfeeding and pumping with very little support in the middle of lockdown in Australia, which was intense, and her skills as an engineer, and has turned both of those things into something that hopefully will impact so many people moving forward for years to come. So I hope you enjoy both Alex's story and that you find comfort in the fact that there are people out there who are working like Alex is to remove barriers to making milk for our babies. Enjoy. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. Having known only a handful of people who had ever done it and only seeing it up close a couple of times, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a childbirth educator, and an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore the systemic, medical, and cultural barriers that make feeding our babies so difficult, so that you know your baby feeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
My name is Alex. I have a husband called Andrew and a daughter called Greta, who's 4. We live in Australia, halfway between Melbourne and Sydney, in a place that has some mountains, not quite like what you have over there in the States, but some of our own anyway. And we've been living here for a few years. We have a dog called Lottie, who's a Swiss Shepherd, and we live just outside of a really small town on about 30 acres.
That sounds lovely. You're also my first Australian guest, so I'm so happy to have you on. So as we start thinking about your baby feeding stories, I would love for you to go back into your memory trove and just into your childhood and think about your cultural upbringing and tell me what your exposure to baby feeding was culturally.
I was the youngest of 2, and we had cousins, but they were in different states. And although they were younger, they were kind of close in age. So I actually I would have been very young when they were feeding. Everyone, to my knowledge, was breastfed. And then after that, I really didn't have much contact with kids or babies at all. And in fact, I wasn't even really convinced I wanted children of my own, probably because of that. And then, I hit sort of 35 and found the right fellow and thought, okay, well, we can do this. But
and so then growing up, like if you're walking around, or even present day, if you're walking around and you see families in shops, in restaurants, in cafes, will you see people openly breastfeeding?
Yeah, I don't think I gave it a second thought before. I just thought it was part of having a family, but it wasn't like something that I had any particular feeling towards or against. And I think I was quite oblivious to how someone might feel when they're in that situation and all of the challenges and joys that come with it. I'm an engineer. That might give a bit more sort of background for people. So in my workplaces, if somebody has children, it's usually not them having the baby. And in that profession in particular, it's usually not them staying at home either. Like they might go home for a few weeks for parental leave, but they come back and nothing really changes. The women in that profession, you know, the ones who keep going, this is because of like structural sexism, but the ones who keep going either, you know, don't have kids or they are the primary breadwinner. And so they've got all the support at home. I don't know. I just was never really exposed to it until I had my own baby, which was like quite a massive shock, and may explain, you know, what actually happened in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. So then go ahead and get into it. Tell me about your baby feeding experience. And then if I have any questions, I'll pop in and ask.
You know, my daughter's now 4 years old, so I've had a bit of time to kind of reflect on it. And I think one of the things that has struck me about the feeding experience is that it is kind of like a catch-all point that takes all of your emotions from the whole fertility journey, right? It is kind of this, can feel like this sign of how good of a mother you are and how successful you've been as a mother. So it just felt like it brought all of this other, you know, all of these emotions up. And the reason I had all these emotions is because before Greta, I'd had a pregnancy before that ended in a stillbirth at 22 weeks. And so I had a very traumatic start having a baby. And then when I finally did have one after a pretty stressful pregnancy, then I sort of felt like, okay, I've got breastfeeding now. I'm just going to go for it. It's going to be fine. You know, this is going to be great. And that's not what happened. So I had an emergency C-section. They did get the baby onto my chest quite quickly, but it took a while for my milk to come in, which I think sounds like in retrospect that's normal, but it seemed like panic stations where I was, and I ended up getting on a pump. The pump wasn't sized well for me. I had a sort of overzealous person do a breast massage, which has since left me with calcifications in the breast. So it damaged my breast tissue quite badly. So I was really bruised. My daughter wasn't latching super well. I was really stressed. And then on top of all of this, we have, you know, I sort of had the impression that formula was the devil. And I know that breast milk is ideal, but in that case, she was losing weight. There were, you know, all of these things were happening. It was just sort of spiraling into this situation where I wanted to give formula I didn't want to give formula. I felt like that would be a terrible, terrible thing to do, but she was starting to get lethargic. So on day 10, coming home from hospital, it was mid-December, which in Australia was really hot. So it's like 40 degrees Celsius that day. I have to calculate that in Fahrenheit, but it's very,
That's
very
in the 90s, I believe.
Yeah, very, very hot. And she was sleeping a lot, and we were just getting really worried. And this is after sort of pumping and feeding and squirting milk into her mouth and using nipple shields and syringe feeding, like all of these things, and recovering from a C-section at the same time. We went into the doctor and just said, I don't know what's going on here. And he said, get straight to hospital. And so we ended up back in hospital at the kids this time, the children's hospital. They were fantastic. They gave her a bit of formula to get her, you know, alive. And then I lucked on to the most fabulous lactation consultant who helped me figure out how to get her feeding well. But I never managed to get her exclusively breastfed. It was always mixed feeding. So from that point on, I had, you know, a feeding session would be like breastfeeding, pumping, and then a little bit of formula. And I did that for about 9 months.
Wow.
I still, at the time, I still felt like I'd failed at 9 months for stopping there. But in retrospect, I'm like, oh my God, like that is an insane amount of effort. I did really well. I'm really proud of what I did. But
yes, you should be.
It felt so awful. I just felt like I'd really messed it up. And I think, looking back, you know, I've got this bubbly, clever, weird 4-year-old girl who had some breast milk and had a bit of everything, and she's doing great. But at the time, I think there was so much wrapped up in it that it didn't feel like that at all.
Isn't it so fascinating how we just zero in on breast milk being the way that we show that we're a good mom or a good parent?
I know, and I don't even know where that comes from, because
right.
I think, like I said, I was a blank slate going in. I don't think I really thought more than a few minutes about breastfeeding. I went to a birth class. I was a bit concerned about the birth, but again, like, I was fine with however it happened. Like, I'm lucky in that I feel comfortable in hospitals. It was a hospital birth. I was just happy to be like taken along for, put me on whatever conveyor belt you want to put me on, and I will do what you need. And I think that I trusted a little bit too much in that kind of system. I think being like, I don't know. I didn't understand what was involved. And I think in retrospect, I wish I'd just read a little bit more, or perhaps quizzed my friends a little harder on what it was really like. And that might have prepared me for thinking, okay, well, I guess like feeding is kind of like having a birth plan. Again, I didn't have one of those, which is kind of like, okay, ideally I'll do this, but if it doesn't work out, this is what I'm going to do, and these are my next steps, and that's cool too. And I just didn't have that perspective at all. And so when it went wrong, it like went wrong,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably know by now that my number one goal is to reduce stress in the perinatal period. So I am so pleased to announce my new partnership with Feast and Fettle, which is a locally prepared home delivery meal service. I was able to select from a list of delicious meal options that got delivered right to my front door for the entire week. Some of the options I chose were zucchini lasagna, roasted carrots, some challah bread, some pork fried rice. Those are just a few of the choices that we had that we devoured. I highly recommend this service as one way to just get one more thing off your plate so that you can spend more time focusing on your family and less time worrying about all the things that you need to do. Just go to feastandfettle.com, which will be linked in the show notes. And if you use my code MILK, MILK, you can get $30 off your first week. Let Feast and Fettle do the cooking for you. If you want to have less anxiety and more confidence so that your parenting journey can feel like you always wanted it to feel, then go to my website right now so that you can have a person by your side who not only knows how you feel, but who combines my expertise of lactation with your expertise of your body and your baby to help you make the next right step in your lactation journey, because that's all you really need to do is make the next right step. And right now, that next right step is going to my website, www.quavenbirthservices.com. And I can't wait to see your name pop up in my inbox or on my phone, on my text messages. Talk to you soon. I want to dive into a couple of aspects of what you've told us already. There's so much that was there. First of all, the person that damaged your breasts from breast massage, was that a lactation consultant or a nurse? Who was that?
No, it was a midwife, and I need to be clear about that. So she was showing me how to massage to stimulate, I guess like
hand expression.
Explain this. Yeah. It wasn't for hand expression. It was to try. It wasn't for hand expression. It was to try to stimulate. I guess it's like an oxytocin response. To stimulate a letdown. And she said to bring milk in, which I'm not sure is a thing or not. And so she did that really hard, and I was like, oh, okay. okay, it has to be hard. Like it's got to be hard. And so she did that for about 5 minutes, both breasts. And it was quite painful, but that's the expert. So I listened to the expert. And so then I kept doing that every feed session as instructed until the next midwife came in and she was like, you did what? No. Don't do that. Stop. So that was probably about 3 feed sessions from that kind of instruction. And so it was, I would say it's like a bit of her, a bit of me. But in the end,
yeah. But this is the thing that can be so confusing because you hear one thing from one person and then the next person comes in and they tell you the exact opposite thing. And then you don't, both of them are experts. You trust both of them and you don't ever know who to fully trust.
Yeah.
And I hear this, I work in a hospital 2 days a month just so I can understand what's going on in the hospital system as an IBCLC and to try to help the system in some way and from my private practice clients. And they'll tell me, I heard 10 different things from 10 different people.
It can be really disorienting. And also, I have I am also very reluctant to, go against the advice or what I think is evidence. So if I just kind of assumed that everything I was being told was evidence-based, I didn't really question it. And since, I've been doing, I'm a certified lactation counselor now. I just did that to try to learn, try to understand at least the landscape. So what is best practice? Where are the complicated things? Where is there evidence? Where is there not really actually much evidence at all? And I think the thing that blew me away after doing that, coming from the field that I'm in, is how little funding there is for research to develop that body of evidence, to build the guidelines, to then educate the care providers to provide us with consistent advice. And I don't think it's reasonable for midwives or doctors or even IBCLCs to have it all on them to be consistent with each other if they're building on, they just don't have that evidence to say something with confidence. And so I think it's just been so striking to me to look at these different disciplines and be like, there's no way in the world of engineering would you ever make a decision that critical about someone's life without having not just one paper, like hundreds.
Right. I know.
Like
and sometimes the studies are with like 30 participants.
Yeah.
They're not like thousands and thousands of participants.
Oh no, I just mean like the way science works, right? It's like one person does one paper and someone else from some other university does another paper. They disagree, they fight it out, maybe for a decade. And then slowly the community comes to realize what they think maybe the answer is with a little bit of certainty. Like that's how science works. And I think that, and the power of it is that over time with volume, you start to draw out some patterns that you can be reasonably confident in. And I think, I know that my language is really annoying and vague. And I think that's where in public discourse and in the media, especially in social media, we get stuck because when I know you must have this, people are like, how do I increase my milk supply? And you're like, well, tell me a little bit more about like why you want to do that. You kind of want to understand the context, and then you've got to weigh up a whole lot of things. And you might say, you might find yourself saying things like, well, this could help, but it might not. And like it might, work in conjunction with it. Like it just gets really vague and people don't want to consume information like that. And so you end up having to come up with these like snippets. And anyway, so I totally understand why it's conflicting. It's a very long way of saying I understand why we're in that position as the consumer. But gosh, it's hard. And it has this like real tangible outcome, which is, bad for a lot of people, unless they're like trained in that area, I guess, themselves. I don't know.
I think lactation care is part science, part art. And what we are trying to do, what I try to do in my practice, is help people to be the expert of their own body and of their baby. So if we can help people to tune in to their babies as the primary indicator of what's happening between their in their breastfeeding or chest feeding or body feeding journey, then that's where they're going to get most of their information. So if somebody asks me a question, like I got multiple questions this weekend about pacifier use. Well, there are some studies about pacifier use. But when somebody asks me as a lactation professional, hey, the nurses are giving my baby a pacifier, is it okay if I use it? I don't say yes and I don't say no. I say, well, first of all, you're the parent, so you get to make that decision. Secondly, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. Here are the benefits of pacifier use. Here are the things that we worry about with pacifier use. And so in the end, here's the things you want to look out for when using a pacifier. And here are the things that it might benefit your baby for. So in the end, you get to make that decision. And so when you word it like that, then the parents are armed with information. They feel like they are empowered to make that call for themselves. And then I'll say, but you can go on such and such site, and do some reading for yourself if you want to read the studies and decide for yourself whether or not you want your newborn to have a pacifier. And I'll say something like, look, if your newborn is in the car and they're screaming and there's, even if they are hungry, you cannot offer them a breast, like that might be a great time for a pacifier. But if they're at home and they're screaming and you offer them the breast and they have fed and they're still screaming and you are tired and your mental health is suffering, that might be a good time for a pacifier use. So it's about tuning into your baby, and there's no hard and fast rules. But sometimes, we get into this position where we are giving people hard and fast rules where there aren't any, because we are dealing with brand new human beings who cannot tell us exactly what they're feeling and thinking. And so we, as their parents, are trying to get to know them and learn what their needs are. And so we should be empowering parents to be the people who spend 24 hours a day with them and know them better than anyone else.
Yeah. I mean, that's so well said. There's so many things in there that make so much sense. Like the first one is by sharing the kind of full gamut or the full range of views there for the parent. Like you said, that's so calming, because like straight away you've kind of like painted the landscape. You're like, yep, some people think this, some people think that. Here's the situations where it might help, here's where it's not. It just kind of takes the sort of extreme away from it as the parent, I think. And then the second really big thing that I know I really had to learn was that there is no answer that's written down anywhere. And actually, like you said, learning your baby is kind of the best thing that you can do.
Right. Yeah.
And that can feel, I'm sure it's not like that for everyone, but for me, that was a huge thing. Yeah. Learning to trust that there wasn't like an evidence-based answer for this, or like I couldn't, my first response to all of this was get onto Google Scholar, find the research, read it, and I was sort of trawling through all of that, and I'm like, I can't figure out what's the answer here. And it took a while for me to figure out like there wasn't an answer, Alex. This is like, you just got to write it out. And so, I mean, I'm sure not everyone's like that, but that's certainly what it felt like for me. I was just really looking for an expert, and I kind of missed that expert probably was me.
Right. Yeah. Like you're the person who's going to know whether or not your baby needs to be supplemented.
Yeah.
If you spend enough time paying attention to your baby's hunger cues.
Yeah. But I probably didn't. Yeah, exactly. But I didn't have the confidence that I was that person, because I was so used to referring to experts, right? Like I'm an expert in a particular area, And so I expect someone else to take that role rather than realizing that I needed to actually.
Right. And I think the experts often take that. They, well-meaning experts.
Mm.
And I think it's taken me 9 years of being a lactation professional, first as a CLC and now as an IBCLC, to really figure out that once I leave, they don't have that expert in the room.
Yeah.
So it's my job to empower them to be the expert. So
it's more psychology than anything else, isn't it?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So even first of all, I try very hard, like the example you give of the breast massage. I try very hard not to touch people. Like, I know she wasn't doing hand expression, but I do teach a lot of hand expression with clients. I try very hard not to touch them myself, but sometimes they're just not quite getting it. And I'll say, would you like me to do it for you so you can see how it feels? And I'll say, you can tell me no, because I know some people don't like to have their breasts touched. But if you would like to feel the pressure that I'm using, then you can.
Yeah.
And then I can show you for a second. Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. But if they say yes, I'll say, now listen, I know what pressure feels good on me, but pain hormones interfere with milk releasing hormones. So if it hurts, I'm not using the right pressure on your body, and you need to tell me. So as I'm doing it, I'll say, are you feeling any pain? Because it should not be painful. So those are the types of questions that as providers, we should be asking people, because sometimes we make assumptions based on what we know feels good on our bodies, but our body is not the person's body that we are working with. It's a different body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So,
and she was, that provider was not, she was well-meaning. I am sure of it, but you have a different body.
Yeah, I do. And I still, it has this sort of long-term effect, right? Where I've got to get breast scans all the time now, and because I've got these lumps, so you got to be on top of it.
But that's such an interesting part of your story. And then I wanted to know, you said it was at day 10 that you went to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said go straight to the hospital.
Well, the GP, the family doctor. Yep.
The family doctor. Okay. So was it? How long had you been home?
I think we went home maybe day 4, or day 5. So we had sort of maybe 5 days back at home, but we were taking her in. I know we took her in to get weighed at least once in that time, back to the same hospital. There was a lactation consultant in that hospital, so we went back to that clinic and had her weighed. And the advice, was like, keep pumping, keep feeding. Don't get on the formula.
And why were they telling you not to use formula?
I think at the time they just said that it would jeopardize your breastfeeding. And if you want your baby to be breastfed, which I did, then you shouldn't be putting her on formula. You need to kind of, teach your body to make more milk. And so if you're replacing your milk with formula, then your body's not going to make more, supply demand kind of thing. So yeah, that was the reason. If I had my time again, maybe I might have looked at expressing colostrum before. I certainly would have given her some formula just to tide her over for a little bit, and then probably got on the pump and fed a bit more. After day 10, it kind of turned around. It was still really, really hard, but I just felt like I had someone who was doing all the things you were just talking about. So, being really patient, teaching me to understand what I was looking at in my baby, understanding when to feed, body positioning rather than just latch. in the hospital, I was taught to like shape the breast into the baby with the C shape thing. I think that's not recommended anymore. And so this new lactation consultant had sort of helped me position the baby well and get her latching as best she could. So it was just a totally different kind of experience. It was still really stressful. I was still, trying to pump like 8-9 times a day. But we were at home with my parents for that period. So we had all of this other care. My husband was off work. So he was, washing bottles and settling and, doing, at night he'd like cover one of my feeds so that I could get some sleep. So it wasn't all awful. We had a lot of support, but, and that's probably the only way I managed to make it to 9 months. But yeah, it was pretty hard. I went back through, I had this notebook, and I'd written down all of the times and feeds and everything. And I was looking back through that the other week and I was like, oh man, that mental space where you're just clinging on to anything. And I think, writing numbers down and looking at patterns, like that's what makes me feel comfortable. That's what's made me feel comfortable my whole life. That's what, my profession is. And I've always been into maths and stuff like that. So, one person might listen to music or listen to a podcast or something that's like my safe space. But so it kind of makes more sense if you know me. But I was looking through that and I was like, oh, this is just, you on edge. Like this is not like a comfortable, relaxed mother. This is like, recording things. So I think that notebook probably lasted about a month. And then I kind of had this realization that it wasn't going to help tracking milliliters and that whatever would be, and I'll get some breast milk into her and some is better than none, if that's what you want to do. And we kind of just went from there.
Okay. And did you ever figure out, so she was latching, but not for very long, or her milk transfer just wasn't, did she just always seem hungry after latching?
Yeah, she was hungry, upset, crying. She'd sort of get on, have a few sucks, and then I don't think she was really getting any milk. I had a couple of times where she got on, would feed well, everything was great. And I sort of thought, oh, this is it. But it just never lasted. So I'm not really sure why. At the start, like day 3, they decided that she had a tongue tie. So that was cut. And yeah, I don't know if that had anything to do with it afterwards. But yeah, she just never quite got the hang of it, or I never quite got the hang of it. Yeah, and then
were you ever in pain?
I did have a lot of pain. The pain at the start was from a shallow latch, and then actually feeding was fine once it was all working well, but because I was pumping so much, I had pain from the pump, and I had pain just because I was being pumped pretty raw, like every 2 hours. I think even the best fitting pump, every 2 hours is not going to be super comfortable because you're just sucking away in a pretty harsh way.
Yeah. And what pump were you using?
I used all sorts of pumps because I was really trying to kind of get the right fit. I started off on a Medela hospital, like the one they wheel out in the hospital, but the flange size was 24, and then I was recommended up to a 27 because they thought I should pull more areola in.
Wait, someone told you needed more areola?
Yeah.
A nurse?
An LC, in the first hospital. So, and I remember looking at the thing like, this can't be right. I'm looking at this diagram, like my nipple looks like it's way too small for this, but she was quite sure about it. And so I kept doing that. And I ended up with these like rings of rubbing that was so raw. It rubbed away the pigment. It took ages for the areola to actually look like areola colored skin again. Even after I went to that second LC, and she helped me get like a better size. And yeah, it was a bit nuts. And so yeah, I had the Medela. I mean, it's not the Medela pump that was the issue; it was the flange. And then I had a Spectra. I tried a Medela swing, but it just didn't have enough suction. I couldn't get any milk out at all, even once I had sort of sizing figured out. I don't think I ever actually got a small enough flange size, but by that stage, I was already like solving the problem myself. So I'd bought some hobby silicon and was creating molds, like 3D printed molds, to make like a silicon pad to go over the pump to just make it more comfortable, but also allow a little bit more movement. I felt like, look, I had a lot of time on my hands. I was reading papers about how, like, the mechanics of how babies feed, and I was like quite taken with this idea of the compression that they have. So it's like this, you know, drawing the milk out by actually releasing their mouth rather than compressing it. And I just thought that was so cool. And so I kind of wanted to figure out if I could like hack my pump to do that, because I was like pretty convinced if I could do that, then I might get more milk. Like I don't know. I was very single-minded at this point. And I had a friend who had a 3D printer and was really good at doing that stuff. And so I was starting to kind of play around with that. And so when I had those cushions or those pads, it was getting much more comfortable, and I had kind of lucked onto a smaller size. I think I ended up with a sort of pad that had a 15 millimeter hole on a 24 mil flange, or a 20 mil flange. So yeah, by the time I got to that, it was totally fine. But yeah, it was definitely a journey to get to that point.
Yeah. So I just think that anyone who triple feeds for 9 months deserves an award. I mean, did it come in the mail? Like,
no,
no, gosh. Really, that is a lot.
I mean, I had a lot of help. I had an excellent partner who did. It wasn't like I was on my own. And like I said, we were living with my parents, so I didn't think I cooked a meal in 9 months. I certainly didn't do any washing. I slept, like fed my baby, and ate what was put in front of me. You know, I basically got taken for walks, like my mother.
With a leash?
Yeah, pretty much. She's a physio. So she's like, you got to get moving, you know, like, let's go. I'll put the, you know, so she'd like get everything ready and like push me out the door. So I wasn't, I know it sounds like, I think any normal mother, yes, but I wasn't in a normal situation. I was really being cared for. And, you know, like we probably lost that these days, but I had the whole community thing going. So yes, I did manage to achieve something pretty cool, but it was because I didn't have to do all of these other things.
So I want to know, you started all this, your pumping situation and your recognition of how poorly designed pumps really are. I don't know if you have read Kimberly Seals-Aller's book, The Big Letdown. Have you read that book? No. Okay, you should put it on your list.
Yeah. Yep.
It's all about all of the forces that have made breastfeeding so difficult for women. And she talks, she has this, it's not an exact quote, but she basically says, we can get people to the moon, yet breast pumps are still basically the same design engineering wise as they were like 20 years ago, you know? Yeah. So we've made some slight improvements, but
it's the same. Like, I mean, again, it just comes down to the amount of investment. And
exactly.
I mean, since like fast forward 4 years, I've since sort of learned a lot about how things are designed and manufactured. So those cushions or those little pads that I was using for myself, I then, you know, designed and manufactured them, you know, into, you know, medical grade facility. And I started working with pumps and learning how these things are made. And I realized a few things. Like the first one is if you're the pump manufacturer and you have to choose which flange size, even if you know what nipple sizes are, if you send out every pump with a flange size that's 15 mils, then it's going to really cause a lot of pain for someone who's 20 mils wide, right? And so you end up making these decisions to say, okay, we'll just put a 24 in because that'll fit most people and cause the least amount of harm. I'm using inverted quotes here, but then you on the other end mean that you're not catering for those people who are 12 and 13 and 14 mils wide. And so I guess the problem is that what I see in every other product that we make, we customize it for the woman or the person, whoever it is. And we say, oh, you want a bra? Okay, which size are you around the waist? What cup size are you? Like, what straps do you want? We have all of these ways of customizing our products, yet it's not that, like, for some reason, we haven't done that for pumps. And like you say, it's just a matter of getting, usually, I mean, for a lot of people, it's a matter of getting the right flange size and the right setup, but it just doesn't come with that. So, yeah.
So it would be really easy just to have like a selection of phalanges and to have somebody size themselves if we were talking to them over the phone, and then to choose the phalanges that they selected and put it in their box and send it off. Now, it's not going to be perfect because often they're ordering prenatally. And then in the hospital I work at, there is a person who comes to every room to have the person select their breast pump. So like, why not just size them and then go to a closet and choose the flanges and put it in the box? Right.
We do it for sneakers, right? Or what do you call them? You call them sneakers,
Sneakers, yeah. It's not that hard.
No, it's not. It just, I don't know. I don't know why it hasn't been done. I mean, to be honest, we have the technology to be able to take a scan of your nipple, 3D print, by we, I mean like the world, right? 3D print a mold that you could then pour silicone into to give you a shape of flange that would fit your nipple shape. And then we could do it for your right breast. So you could have your left and your right. And because they're probably different, you could have a different one for each, right? The issue is that, we don't want to pay for that. That would be like $100 a flange. So it's sort of, especially when you're talking about medical devices, it can get expensive. But we have the technology. We just, haven't applied it.
It would be $100 a phalange, but if you're talking that versus all the money people have to spend on formula and that's not really that expensive for a medical device. No,
it's not necessarily. I mean, crazier things have been done. So
my prosthetic limbs cost $8,000.
Right.
I wear a prosthetic leg. That's a fairly cheap prosthetic leg, but it's
And people, I mean, this sort of bespoke idea of creating bespoke things with the technology we have, it's honestly not that crazy. I think it's just hasn't really been applied yet.
It's this thing where I feel like when it comes to women's health, I feel like we just don't prioritize it.
No. Why would we do that? I think it's just everywhere. There's this great book, I think it's called hidden. I have to get it. The Invisible Woman.
Okay,
and it's about this bias of research and data that we choose to invest in creating or collecting that then negatively affects women's experience. It means that, for example, crash test dummies. So cars and their safety is designed around, a standard. You got to choose something, so they choose a, standard male. But it means that women are now, are more likely to die in a car accident if they get into one, and they're more likely to be severely injured. There's other things like safety protection vests and personal protective equipment, so PPE, typically designed for male bodies. So
yes,
if you think about vests, a lot of women, you know, the breast is compressed, and so it's really uncomfortable. It doesn't fit right, and so it doesn't actually keep them as safe, or they don't wear it, which is even worse.
Right.
So there's all of these like little things in society that have been created because the woman hasn't been put at the center of the design process. And once you see it once, it's like, everywhere. You know, like you learn a new word and you hear that word everywhere. It's the same thing. You're just like, oh, that's why like breastfeeding is so hard. It's because, you know, we've designed our systems to basically stack it against you and then make you feel like it's your fault. Like it's just everywhere. And I think, you know, hopefully it's improving, but it's a slow burn. And yeah, so you see it everywhere. You see it in these products, and things like breast pumps are a good example too, right?
Yeah.
How do we, you know, like when we look at even just the basic thing of, okay, what is the normal, or not normal, it's the wrong word to use, but what's a like average size of a nipple, or the range, the distribution of nipple sizes? So you would think that there would be some public database collected with some research done on it, but there isn't. When you go to look at nipple research, there's more on creating the ideal nipple shape for
oh my God.
attractiveness. I'm not kidding. Like, it would be funny if it wasn't so awful. So for attractiveness, than there is on the actual nipple shape of and I say female because it's like biologically female body, and let alone a lactating nipple, right? So we know that nipple shape changes, but we only know that, you know, we only know that from what you've seen, but which is true. I'm not saying that it isn't, but I'm just saying that there's not like a body of data about that with which to make decisions. And so, yeah, there's also like a disturbing amount of research into how to identify the female nipple so that it can be taken down from social media. Like, honestly, more invested in that than in just like the shape of the nipple. There is research, obviously, on the breastfeeding nipple, but it's just not on that anatomy or that size or anything like that. It's pretty upsetting, actually, when you look at it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then tell me how
what you do about it?
Yeah, tell me what you're doing about this. Please tell me you are changing something about this.
I'm trying to. So in a few months, we are going to be, we're having a campaign. We're calling it the Uncomfortable Feed. And it is a call out for people to self-measure, to measure themselves and share their measurements into a database that we will build to try to build kind of an encyclopedia of nipple shapes and types and sizes. And so we're hoping from that data we will be able to provide something back to the community to say, okay, here's what we see. And we're hoping to get a lot of responses, and that way we'll be able to kind of contribute our bit back. So that's happening in a few months. So I'll definitely update you on that. But yeah, aside from kind of crowdsourcing it yourself and just having, you know, women do it ourselves, I guess it's like, you know, get into power, funnel some cash into the area of women's health. Like, that's all you know, advocate for it. I don't know. Yeah, it's pretty frustrating to see it so overlooked. And it's not just breastfeeding, right? Like, it's endometriosis. There's another great example. Women, you know, taking 7 years or whatever to get a diagnosis because your pain isn't like considered to be a real thing, you know.
Right, exactly.
Anyway,
okay.
Soapbox.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. So will you let me know when you launch this campaign for people measuring? Okay. And so then you have also you designed a...
Oh yeah. So, I designed these cushions.
The cushions are it is, okay. So this silicone, okay. And it is called Milkdrop.
Milkdrop breast pump cushion, a cushion.
Milkdrop breast pump cushion. So it is an insert.
It's an insert. It's like an attachment. It stretches over the pump. onto your flange. So it can fit, like if you've got a standard flange, it can fit on top of that, or it can fit like a smaller flange. And it just allows your nipple to move a bit more with the pump, and it's quite a lot softer. So it's sort of like it's 10 times softer than the pump. So it's this really squishy thing. And so for some people, they just find it a lot more comfortable. But again, like with a lot of pumping stuff, it's a bit of trial and error. So you know, try it, don't try it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
So all along you were telling me about these inserts and I was like waiting to hear like more about a pump, but this
Oh yeah. I mean, we will have a pump coming out. We're working on something that's really cool, but it's a while off, like with research and development. So yeah, that will be very, very cool, the way that it's working. And, you know, we might come out with some pumps in the meantime, but the thing that we have at the moment are these cushions. So, yeah.
Okay.
I should open with that. Yes.
Yeah, that's totally fine. So will you just like state like what you designed and the name of it, and then I'll figure out where it'll go in the podcast. So that's not me awkwardly being like, oh, and so you also.
Sure. So, yeah. So when I was pumping, I invented with a friend these super soft silicone pads that stretch over the head of most breast pumps. And what they do is allow the nipple to move a little bit more naturally, and they soften the whole sort of experience. And so some people find that a lot more comfortable. And then since then, you know, we've made cushions for different kinds of pumps. We're coming out with some for those popular new wearable pumps that people have, which can be kind of uncomfortable. So we have some cushions for those, and then we'll probably come out with some pumps of our own shortly that they fit well on. And then in a few years, once we get it through the research and development process, we will be coming out with a whole new kind of pump, something that just behaves a little bit more naturally, but it's still, you know, in that quagmire of research and development. So it's alternating between being 3D printed, tested, taken apart, changed, gone back in, you know, nothing, you know, you think it's working and then something fails, and it's that kind of thing. So yeah, that's basically what I do. So we have a lab where we're just trying to improve how pumping feels for women.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. Okay, this is amazing. And where can people purchase the cushion?
Yeah, so that you can find them on milkdroppumps.com. And we have an Instagram, milkdrop_pumps. You can also contact us on. Take a look at them. Contact us if you have any questions. You know, it can be tricky to figure out which pumps and flange sizes to use, but we can help with that. And yeah, hopefully help people have a more comfortable experience.
Okay. And can professionals buy them to have on hand for people to try?
Yeah, so we have a special lactation program. So we'll send you out a sample of each size so you can actually try it. I think it's really important as a professional to be able to, if you can help someone try it while you're there, then you know it's going to work for her, and then we can give you a discount code for her to use to order themselves, or we can give some to you wholesale, that kind of thing. But I think you know, what's really cool is to be able to try it in person with the different flange sizes. You know, if someone has elastic nipples, they might need something different from someone who has inverted nipples. Like, it's just one more thing to add to your kit to try.
Yes. Amazing. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much for taking a problem that you had and using your engineering background to devote it to a problem that so many people have, devoting it to a women's health issue, and then recognizing that there is so little research done on this and doing something about that. I can't wait to send in my nipple size to you.
Thank you so much.
I am no longer lactating and will not again.
That's fine. All nipples are nipples. Yes, I think. And look, thank you so much for having me, you know, to speak. I think it's quite it's quite a generous thing for you to do. I'm not from this industry and I don't want to sort of step on any toes or make any assumptions about things. So it's been really wonderful to be so included in the community of lactation professionals, and to, I think that there's so much that engineers and designers can do to support you to solve these problems. And I just am excited to kind of intersect the two. That's where the cool stuff really happens. So yeah, thanks for being so generous to have me.
Yeah. And you know what? You take your space in this community. There's more than enough room for you, and you can take all the space that you want. You're welcome here.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
It's amazing to hear a story like this where somebody really struggled, but they took their skills, the skill set that they had, and turned that into something that can be used for good for so many other people. So I'm really excited to hear what happens. And if you would like to connect with Alex, if you want her to touch base with you once the studies are coming out about nipple sizes, so that this can be sent out to pump companies and they can be getting phalange sizes out that are more accurate, then please be in touch with her. The information is all linked in the show notes so that you can touch base with her. And speaking of barriers being removed, if cooking is one of the barriers that makes it difficult for you to have a joyful parenting experience, then go to my website or go to the Feast and Feta website. Either one, you can find the code MILK at either one to get $30 off your first home-cooked meal delivered right to your front door. There's lots of different plans to choose from, so you can choose the one that's right for your family and have delicious food taken care of so that you can spend more of these long summer days with your family hanging out and less time worrying about what you're going to put on the table. And with that, I will see you next week. And Alex is going to be coming back to talk about pump design and what she has noticed as an engineer. So be looking out for that quick hit episode. Bye.